We begin this holy story around the year 300 AD. Saint Adrian was about 28 years old and descended from the first Roman nobility. At this early age he was already highly distinguished at the imperial court of Emperor Galerius. At the court of Galerius he bore witness to the sufferings of the Christians when they were tortured in the presence of the emperor. He often saw how the Christians suffered the most cruel pains with joy. And so he came to the conclusion that such strength must be more than human, and that there must be a God who watched over these Christians. After a while, he also became convinced that this God must be the only true God. After yet another Christian was tortured in front of him,
Strike him, Centurion, very roughly.
he finally confessed publicly that he had converted to Christianity and desired to live and die as such. He had barely spoken the words when Emperor Galerius cast him into a dungeon where 23 other Christians were already confined. Natalia, the wife of Adrian, was greatly rejoiced when she heard of his conversion, since she had already been a Christian for a long time, but she had to keep it quiet because of the persecutions. And so she hastened to the dungeon, threw herself upon his neck, and praised him that at last he had recognized the truth of Christianity. She encouraged him to remain firm in the approaching strife until she was no longer permitted to stay. A few days later, Adrian was informed that the emperor had sentenced him to die.
Do it.
Not in the least terrified at this message, he bribed the jailer to allow him to go to see his wife. "Hey, here's some money. Can I go out and tell my wife the wonderful news of my death sentence?" Okay, sure. "Cheers, mate. I'll be back in a few hours."
What?
Ma'am, Adrian was released and is coming home. When she heard this, she became terrified, since she thought that Adrian had renounced his Christian faith, which would be why they released him from jail. Running hastily to the door of the house, she slapped the door against him. "You shall not pass, you apostate!" Adrian called to her and said, "I have not renounced the true faith. I just came back to tell you that I have been sentenced to die." Natalia quickly opened the door and fell at his feet. She begged his forgiveness, and after some conversation and some necessary medication, she returned with him to the prison. On the day on which Adrian was brought before the emperor, Natalia went to him and said, "The time has now arrived. Now be a man for Christ's sake." Adrian, now filled with Christian heroism, went to the emperor.
This is
God's realm! No, this is madness. The tyrant ordered him first to be scourged with rods, then beaten with clubs, and after this to be torn with small iron hooks. Having suffered all of this, he was led back to the dungeon, where Natalia waited for him. Embracing him most tenderly, she congratulated him. "You did really well." "Thanks." She wiped the blood that flowed from his wounds and endeavored in every possible way to give him some comfort. When the emperor heard of this, he forbade to admit women into the prison. And so Natalia went home, put on male attire, returned to Adrian, and confused his sexual orientation.
We bring in the studio this morning Mr. Lesbian. Thank you for coming in. Why are you gay?
Who says I'm gay?
You are gay.
I am male and attracted to a female.
So who is gay?
Soon after, the emperor commanded to cut off the feet and crush the legs of all imprisoned Christians. The Christians prepared themselves for the cruel martyrdom, and Natalia requested the executioners to begin with her husband. She did this so that the sight of the sufferings of the others might not give him fear. Encouraging him to show bravery and strength, she accompanied him to the place of execution. Adrian? Yes? Tell the executioner to cut off your hands too. What?
Do it.
Excuse me, good sir, but could you please cut off my hands too while you're at it? There, Adrian manifested a heroism such as perhaps the world had never seen before. Ah! Natalia laid at the feet of her husband and held his feet in place until the executioner had cut them off. She then did the same with his hands. Adrian remained fearless to his last breath. Natalia was kissing and worshipping his feet and hands, but was not allowed to take them home with her. However, she managed to sneak one of Adrian's hands into her bosom. After all the prisoners had been executed, their bodies and limbs were thrown upon a pile of wood to burn them. But obviously, a terrible storm arose. Everyone fled, and the rain extinguished the fire, which gave the faithful bystanders an opportunity to carry the bodies and limbs yet untouched by the flames into the nearest Christian dwelling. This happens every goddamn time. The Christians decided to send the bodies to Constantinople for safekeeping. Natalia stayed in her home, where she kept Adrian's hand at the end of her bed. It brought her great comfort. But then it happened that a Roman tribune noticed how beautiful, rich, and noble Natalia actually was, and so he asked the emperor's permission to marry her. A delegation arrived at her home. Good day, madam. The Roman tribune Vulgarius would like to marry you. Let me think on that for a few days. Oh, please, God, save me.
Okay.
Go to the place where you have kept the bodies of the martyrs.
Okay.
And so she took Adrian's hand and boarded a ship. When the tribune heard of this, he immediately set out in pursuit of the ship. But suddenly, a heavy storm arose and forced the tribune to turn back. When Natalia reached Constantinople, she immediately went to the house where they had kept the bodies and laid Adrian's hand back with his body. She prayed next to his body and fell asleep. The moment has come to join me in eternal peace. She awoke, related her dream, again closed her eyes, and calmly and peacefully expired.